So we got another bracket going up here on this wall. Here's a little 9,000 BTU Senville unit I put up a couple years ago for this fellow. And he wants to do something in this corner here, so we're going to move this machine today over to this other set of brackets, and we're going to run the pipe above it. Okay, so before I get into actually pumping down this heat pump today, I wanted to talk just briefly about the heat pump cycle for a mini split. And I've got a little drawing here. And so if we're in cooling mode, the evaporator's in the inside head and the condenser is in the outside unit. Now on a heat pump, you can do both. You can cool the inside of the house and move that heat outdoors through this cycle, or it turns itself around and you can heat the room inside. You can pass that heat from outdoors, even out of cold air, into the house. So it's a reversing cycle. There's a four-way valve that'll do that. Okay, so and why you want to have the system set up in cooling mode inside the building when you do a pump down is what you're going to do is you're going to close the discharge from the condenser, and you're going to absorb heat in here, and the refrigerant's all going to come down and it's going to get condensed, and that's why we're going to put our vacuum gauge on here. And whenever this reaches zero pressure, like we've sucked this down into just about a vacuum, and once we got a zero on the gauge, we'll isolate it here, turn off the compressor, and all the refrigerant is down here in the condenser in that outside unit. Okay, if we were to try and do a pump down when the heating is selected the other way around, if you're on heating inside the building, this is acting as the evaporator. You're not going to get it all into the outside unit that way, because this is set up to absorb heat in this cycle and release heat here. And the other way around, it absorbs heat here and releases it outside. So you want to have it in cooling mode before you do a pump down. Okay, so we're going to remove this access cover here. Just like that. All right, so the big one is the suction, and the small one is the discharge. All right. So what we're going to do is initially we're going to shut both of these valves. We're going to hook our line set up to the low pressure side. And then we're going to open the low pressure side. And we're going to run the system in air conditioning mode. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be running the refrigerant out of the evaporator. When the pressure drops to zero, we'll isolate this, turn our power off, and then the full refrigerant charge will be in the condenser and the compressor. Then we can disconnect our lines and move the unit. Okay, I'm just going to take these caps off here. Okay. Okay, close this one. So this is the bigger line. So that's the low side. So that's where we want to hook our gauge to. Okay. So I've hooked my low pressure side to here, and I've opened both those valves again. Okay, so I got the remote control for the unit, and I'm going to use the mode switch, and I'm going to change it to cool. Okay, so we're going to turn it on in cool, and we're going to drop that temperature way down. Drop that way down to its coolest temperature, which looks like it's 62 Fahrenheit. Okay, now we got the unit running in AC mode. We got both valves open. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the discharge, which is the small line. All right. We turn off the discharge from the outside unit. Now we'll watch the gauge here, and when this drops to zero, we'll turn it off. See it come down? let it run. And we've got our disconnect here, so whenever it comes to 0 and I turn it off, once I close that valve, I'm going to pull the disconnect. It's getting close. It's almost there. Okay, now we'll turn this off. Now we'll pull the disconnect. Okay, and that stops the unit. And those lines should be down in a slight vacuum, that's fine. Okay, now all the refrigerant's out in here. So it's safe to disconnect these lines. They'll be under a slight vacuum, that's okay. And then we're gonna move the unit and extend the lines and extend our cables, and I'll show you all that. See that gauge come up. Okay, back up to 0. Same over here. Okay, so what we did was I backed my truck in here. I lifted that unit onto the tailgate and then lifted it up there. It only weighs about maybe 100 pounds. So I did it all by myself. It's pretty easy. But that's where it was. And that's where it is now. Okay, so that's the arc of the refrigerant lines. Maybe just a little higher once we get it attached to the machine here. But I got some nylon blue I'm going to put on those fittings. I'm going to tighten them down. And we put a generous amount on there. It doesn't clog the system even if it gets inside the line, so there's no worries. Get this one in place. There's a bit of forgiveness in these lines. You just don't want to kink them. You can bend them a little bit. There, that sits in there nice and straight. Okay. Let's see. And we're going to use 2 wrenches on these to tighten them. One on the nut and one on the fitting. Okay, so I'm holding the valve with one wrench and tightening with the other. Now, there is a special torque and a torque wrench you can use for this, but I've done a number of systems where I use nylon blue and I just tighten them snug but not over tight, and then when you do your vacuum test, that'll be the determining factor whether or not it's done right. I haven't had any problem, but there is a specified torque for this, and there's a special torque wrench that the techs use. And you know, if you want to have it really, you know, done right, hire a tech. Don't try and do it yourself. Don't try and do what I'm doing. I'm just saying that I'm doing it this way. I'm not advising you to do it this way. So there, nice and snug, and the other one's the same. I've got it, I already have it snugged up, but I'll show you here. Just hold it across the cap here like this so it doesn't turn, and then yeah, nice and snug like that. Okay, and we left our gauge on here. Now we're gonna hook up our vacuum pump. on this charge. So we've got our charge line here, charge and vacuum line. So we're going to run our vacuum pump on this line set and make sure that these connections are good to go. Okay, so both valves are still closed, but the line set is open to the gauge, and we've got our charge connection here. The charge and vacuum connection we're going to take down and put it on the pump here. We'll open up this gauge so that this valve opens the gauge to the line set. The other side is closed. We'll leave that closed. All right. Now we'll turn on the pump. Okay, here we go. That's drawing down into a vacuum. Okay, that's drawing down into a vacuum. Okay, we're going to run that for 30 minutes and then we're going to isolate it and make sure there's no leaks. Okay, so these wires that come out, there's red, white, black, and this one's got green, this one's yellow, so that's fine. And they're all 14 gauge. Believe it or not, these are 14 gauge, only a smaller sheathing on them. But I'm just back spliced them and I'm going to tape them, that's fine. Normally I would heat shrink them, but I don't have any heat shrink here today, but this will be fine. Okay, so that's been running about a half an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to isolate that. So when we shut this, it shuts off this line from the vacuum pump, but it leaves the gauge open to our low pressure line right here. Okay, now I can turn off the pump. And we'll take note of where that is and hopefully that it doesn't rise. If that doesn't rise, then we don't have any leaks. So we'll leave that for about a half an hour. Okay, so over here, we brought our wire in, some of this liquid tight through a 90. And we just ran it with the refrigeration lines like that. And that cable came a little long, and because this has been moved before, it might be moved again, who knows. Instead of cutting it, I just rolled it up there, that's fine. And we're still holding vacuum. Still holding vacuum, so that's looking good. I'm gonna make these connections up here, and then we'll see about turning that refrigerant on and trying the system out. Okay, so just a note, the code is actually for stranded wire in here inside this conduit, and I use solid number 12 wire. So that's not what you're supposed to do. So don't follow me exactly, but if you're going to run wires inside a conduit, it's supposed to be flexible wire. It's supposed to be stranded wire, not solid copper wire. But that's what I've done, and it's okay. Not much flex in these wires anyway, but just so you know. So just to ward off any of the comments of the guys that are going to say, oh, you're supposed to use stranded wire in there. Oh, you broke the code, blah. That's what I've used, solid number 12 wire. Anyway, just about ready to put the cover on there. Okay, so here's the line to the heat pump and the hot and neutral in the ground in the back there. And this is your disconnect switch. So this one and this one is the hot and neutral out of the breaker. This is the hot and neutral going out to the heat pump, and the ground's in the back there. The breaker is turned off inside, and we got these connections done. So we're going to put this dead front in right now. So that just sits in there like that. And for these disconnects, there's this reversible connector. So when on is facing up like that, if you plugged it in, that would allow power to flow through from the breaker to the heat pump. And you can have it turned over and stuck in there like that, and those contacts are out of circulation. And but you can just leave it out, and it's meant that you can sit it in there when you're working on the unit in the off position. But some people just like to leave these out while they're working. And but anyway, knowing that the power is still off in there, the breaker's off, I'm going to put this back in here in the on position like this. Okay, and then all we got to do is turn on the breaker to get this thing going. But we have another step first. We've got to check our vacuum. Okay, so our vacuum held. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our caps off. Okay. All right, now both those valves are shut. And all the refrigerant in the system is inside the container here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to crack this just enough to break the vacuum on this line with refrigerant. We don't want to open up our lines. We don't want to open this up yet. This has got a Schrader valve in behind it. But if we were to take this gauge off here now, we might suck a little air into the system. We don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to crack this open just enough to break. See, okay, we're out of a vacuum, okay? There's a slight pressure went into that line. Now I've closed the valve again, okay? Now, when I take this off, there's a little puff of refrigerant, and that's the end of it. There's nothing else, okay? And you see the Schrader valve is there. All right, we're going to put the cap back on that. That way, by capping this off first, if there's a leak in that Schrader valve, we're not going to lose refrigerant to the atmosphere. Okay, so that's done. These are out of play right now, and all that's left to do is open these two refrigerant valves. You might have just heard it running into the lines. So this is that's the suction line. Just bring it out till it stops, don't force it. And the other line. And just bring it out till it stops, don't force it, they're both open. And we'll put our caps on. Plug those down. That's it. All right, let's go through it. We've got the machine changed to a different bracket. We ran the lines over. We vacuumed out the lines. It held for about an hour. We've got the refrigerant back into those lines. We ran an extension on our communication cable. We left it a little long. We just balled it up there. It's fine. And we ran another piece of liquid tight and a new wire all the way from here all the way over to our disconnect. We've got the disconnect wired in. Now we're going to go in and start the system and see if it works. Okay, we're going to turn on the power. And then we're going to turn our unit on cold. We've got it set on cooling. We'll turn it on. And that's starting up. And then we'll just let that run. And let's go outside and check the outside unit. We didn't do anything in here. We didn't disturb anything in here. Everything should be fine. I feel it's blowing nice cold air. And there it is. It's running. I had changed it over just now to heat mode, but it ran on cooling mode for a moment or two. I changed it over, I stopped it, put it into heating mode. And there it is, that's moved. Anyway, hopefully that helps somebody. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you again here very soon on Everyday Projects. Bye for now.